The most dreaded words to ever hear are, "You have cancer." Next to heart disease, cancer is the second leading cause of death in the United States. Hello, and welcome to the Mind-Body-God Connection. Today, we're going to talk about the subject of cancer, a new way of looking at cancer. Last year, this disease claimed the lives of over 560,000 Americans. This most dreaded disease is no respecter of persons. Not so long ago, the media reported several high-profile celebrities who lost their battle with this disease. Farrah Fawcett, the former Charlie's Angel, she died of anal cancer. Singer, actor, and dancer Patrick Swayze passed away as a result of pancreatic cancer. There were also political officials, Senator Ted Kennedy from brain cancer, and former press secretary Tony Snow from colon cancer. Cancer claims the life of one individual every 56 seconds. The lady next door, the coworker or friend, an aunt, an uncle. We all know someone living with cancer. John and Stephanie were high school sweethearts. He was a quarterback with the football team and she was the lead cheerleader. They made a handsome couple and they were engaged shortly after high school. Stephanie went off to nursing school and John worked for the city. After graduating, they married. They had 2 children and worked very hard to achieve the American dream, the house, to travel, and to send their kids to college. Stephanie worked full-time as a registered nurse and picked up extra shifts to work towards their goal. She had a very hectic schedule and had little time to prepare meals. She eventually fell into the routine as many of her co-workers, ordering out Kentucky Fried Chicken one day, pizza the next, and on and on and on. The entire family was on the standard American diet, foods that were high in fat, loaded with sugar and calories, highly refined, and low in nutritive value. John became a couch potato. He still loved sports, but now as a spectator. His favorite pastime was eating, and he was a connoisseur of all types of foods. One day, Stephanie received a call while at work. She was a nurse in the same hospital that John had been taken to. She received a call saying, "Come quickly." When she arrived, she found that John was in the midst of being resuscitated. Stephanie, a cardiac nurse, stood helpless as the team attempted to revive him, but they were unsuccessful. John had suffered a massive heart attack at the age of 35. Well, as you can imagine, she was devastated. She had lost the love of her life, and it was very difficult for her and the children. But she put on a good face and went back to work pursuing her dreams. She worked harder trying to compensate for the loss of John's salary. Several years passed and one morning while getting ready for work, she noticed a lump in her breast. She was soon to hear those most dreaded words, "You have cancer." Stephanie became the lady next door, the aunt, the sister, the friend. She was my co-worker. Unfortunately, Stephanie died at the age of 42 from breast cancer. What is cancer? And how does it start? Cancer starts as a result of an injury to the cell. The injury causes the cell to become abnormal. But let's look at normal cells first. The human cell contains the building blocks for our life, our genetic blueprint. And we have many different types of cells. We have red blood cells, nerve cells, skin cells, muscle cells, and fat cells, among a few. These cells are programmed to multiply and to divide, making exact replicas. And after 30 to 60 replications, these cells are programmed to die, a process which is called apoptosis. A new cell then arises and begins the process all over again. If during reproduction a cell becomes abnormal, it either repairs itself or goes on a suicide mission called apoptosis. Cancer cells result from cells that were at one time normal but have gone bad. These cells are now mutated, and they continue to multiply and to divide, and they refuse to die. In essence, these cells become immortal, and they behave like renegades, outlaws, in which, and if given the opportunity, cancer cells would live forever. This was clearly seen in the case of Henrietta Lacks. Henrietta is a woman who was diagnosed with cervical cancer in 1951. She was treated at Johns Hopkins, and her cells were taken without consent. Her cells have refused to die. Currently, they are grown in laboratories around the world for research. These cells have multiplied to an incredible number, which has been estimated to be the equivalent of 2 individuals. And this was over 60 years ago, and the cells continue to multiply. This is the problem with cancer cells. They refuse to die. They spread and set up camp in other areas of the body. They are like professional hitchhikers, and the way they travel to other parts of the body is very interesting. They can recruit their own blood vessels, a process called angiogenesis, and then they travel through the arteries, the veins, and the lymphatic system. When cancer cells arrive at new locations, it is called metastasis. They then set up camp and begin the process of multiplying and dividing all over again. So what are the risk factors for cancer? Why does a normal cell become abnormal? There are many factors that cause alterations in the cells, and they are known as carcinogens. They act on the cell's DNA and lead to cell injuries. On a daily basis, we come into contact with thousands of carcinogens in our environment and have fought many battles with cancer and have won hands down. And this is due to a healthy immune system. However, repeated exposures to carcinogens and poor lifestyle choices will wear down the even most robust of immune defenses. There are many agents that cause cancer. There are chemical agents, biological agents, and physical agents. Take, for instance, industrial plants. In these plants, 2 toxic chemicals are produced: vinyl chloride, which is PVC, and dioxin. PVC makes the raw material for plastic, and 12 billion pounds of this chemical is produced every year for the production of plastic. It is in just about everything that we use, from the handles on our toothbrush to the sidings of our homes, and everything in between. The most serious problem with PVC occurs after its production. It is a deadly carcinogen. PVC leaks into the environment, and it affects those in closest proximity. In 2010, CNN did a special report called Toxic America, and they looked at residents in a small town, Mossville, Louisiana. In Mossville, this community is enclosed by 14 industrial plants. It is the largest PVC facility in the United States, and it has a higher than normal use. They have a higher than normal incidence of cancer. In just one family, 8 out of 10 members who had no previous history of cancer developed it after these industrial plants moved into the community. And all of the members of this family unfortunately died. In addition to cancer, many of the residents had a higher incidence of other debilitating disease. What about dioxin? It has been called the most toxic substance to man. Dioxin is also a byproduct of manufacturing plants. The EPA states that there is no known safe level for exposure to dioxin. Now, it might be familiar to you, maybe under another name, maybe Agent Orange, because dioxin was used during the Vietnam War. And it was used at that time as an herbicide to kill the thick jungle brush. But its spray, the spray from this dioxin, has been known to cause thousands of deaths and serious birth defects. Now, getting back to the Mossville residents, the studies were done in which they drew blood samples, and it revealed that dioxin levels were 3 times higher in the Mossville residents than in the normal U.S. population. Governmental reports indicated that significant levels of dioxins was in the household dust, in the soil, and in food. Now, this chemical does not easily break down. It accumulates in fatty tissues and it's extremely toxic to the body. It is highly concentrated in tissues of animals, and greater than 90% of human exposure is through our food, meat, dairy, and fish. Now, it is also responsible for many types of cancers and a host of other debilitating diseases. What about our agricultural toxins, insecticides, herbicides, and pesticides? Well, herbicides, insecticides, they are a way of life. And the suffix "side" literally means to kill. And it is very effective in killing. It does its job quite well. In fact, I saw this firsthand years ago when my yard became infested with crabgrass. Now, I like a well-manicured lawn. In fact, my neighbors would often say to me, "Your lawn is just gorgeous." And so when my lawn became infected, I decided to take care of the problem myself. The person that usually takes care of my garden, well, you know, I thought I would save some money. So I went out to my Home Depot and I bought something, and unfortunately, it killed not only the crabgrass, but it killed the flowers, and in fact, nothing grew in that area for over 2 years. It is very effective. Herbicides are toxic. They are used to kill weeds and have been linked to pancreatic cancer. A study was done beginning back in 1990, and it involved 89,000 individuals, 57,000 men, and 32,000 women. They were the wives of farmers from the states of Iowa and North Carolina. During this study, 50 herbicides were evaluated, and 2 were isolated and showed to have a significantly high correlation to development of pancreatic cancer. Cells are injured in the presence of chemicals. Our body has over 100 trillion cells, and each cell functions as an independent unit. On an average day, on a daily basis, we replace 10 billion cells, and every 3 to 4 months we generate an entirely new blood supply. All units of the body rely on getting the right information at the right time. When given the right building materials, such as nutrients and oxygen, and the right information, each member does its job. Let's look at the role of DNA. The nucleus is the center of the cell. It is the command post, and it houses the DNA, which is our genetic blueprint. As with any community, when problems occur, communication is not always clear and can cause serious problems. The DNA's role is to transcribe information. It tells the cells what to do. But when chemicals are present, substances can block the code and transcription errors can occur. These errors are passed on to the cells and then lead to mutations. As a nurse, I have traveled to many states, and I have traveled abroad. And I remember on one assignment, I was sent to the oncology floor, which is a floor for cancer patients. I was shocked to find out that over half of the nurses were either battling cancer or were at that time in remission. All of these nurses were trained in handling chemotherapeutic drugs. And I can vividly recall the yellow box containers that read toxic chemicals. As I reflect back, I wonder, did their constant exposure to these chemicals lead in part to their cancer? What about biological causes? There are carcinogens known as viruses and bacteria. These can cause cancer also. Hepatitis B is a virus that affects the liver. It is also responsible for 80% of all liver cancers. HPV is another virus. It is known as the human papillomavirus virus, and it is a viral infection that spreads through sexual contact. It is one of the causes of cervical cancer in women. Then we have bacteria, H. pylori, which is a bacterium found in patients with stomach ulcers. Research shows that there is a link between this bacteria and the development of stomach cancer. What about physical causes? X-rays, ultraviolet rays are also examples of physical carcinogens. Radiation goes straight through the cell. It interrupts the DNA during the replication, and this can cause results in transcription errors. Asbestos is another carcinogen that can lead to cancer. Why do some people get cancer and some do not? We share the same environment and come in contact with carcinogens on a daily basis, but not everyone develops cancer. Take, for instance, smoking. Cigarette smoke is the leading cause of lung cancer, and it contains over 4,000 toxins. Let's look at two individuals who were smokers. One developed cancer and the other one did not. George Burns. He was deemed one of the funniest comedians of all times. His trademark was his cigarette or his cigar. On and off stage, it was always in hand. George Burns once said, "If I knew I was going to live this long, I would have taken better care of myself." He was a funny guy. He was always laughing, and he appeared to be stress-free. He worked shortly up until his death and died at the age of 100. On the other hand is Peter Jennings. He was an evening anchor for ABC World Night News. He was one of my favorite journalists, and over the years I watched his program. And on several occasions I observed during the transition to a commercial break that he would turn in his chair and take a puff from his cigarette. And I thought to myself, he must be really stressed. Well, he eventually announced that he had been diagnosed with lung cancer. And I was, of course, saddened and disappointed, but not particularly surprised. Peter Jennings began smoking at the age of 13 and was a heavy smoker up until 1988. It was said at the time of his death that he picked up the smoking habit again because of the stress during the 2001 Trade Center bombing. He was so stressed out that he needed a cigarette. Peter Jennings died of lung cancer in 2005. So what accounts for two different outcomes? What other factors play a role in the development of cancer? Does stress play a role? Research is showing that there are correlations between psychological stress and cancer. What does the research say? Well, a study was done by the University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center, and they found that when mice with ovarian cancers were stressed, their tumors grew and spread much faster. The study demonstrated that there is a mind-body connection in the progression of cancer and possibly in its promotion. This study showed that stress hormones bind directly to receptors on tumor cells. It stimulates the growth of new blood vessels, a process called angiogenesis. And this new blood supply enables the tumor to become more aggressive. Dr. Saad was the lead researcher for this study. And he based this study on observations in patients that had ovarian cancer. This is what he noticed, that women who were extremely stressed and had low social supports had a higher level of stress hormones. And those with low stress and high social support had lower stress hormones. So based on his observations, he wondered about the role of stress and the development of cancer. So he compared and contrasted the differences between stressed and non-stressed rats that had ovarian cancer. Now, of course, rats don't have cancer. They genetically engineered these rats for cancer. The stressor was confinement, and there were 3 groups. In group 1, they had no exposure to confinement. Group 2 was confined to a small space for 2 hours a day, and group 3 was confined for 6 hours. After 3 weeks, they measured the number of tumors, and the tumor sizes were also evaluated. In group 2, the tumors were 2.5 times larger in mice that had been stressed for 2 hours. In group 3, the tumors were 3.6 times larger in that group, which was exposed for 6 hours of stress. In groups 2 and 3, they also found that in half of these 2 groups, the tumors had spread to the liver or spleen. However, in the group that had no confinement, there was no increase in size and no spreading of the tumor. Now, think about it. How would you feel if you were quarantined for 2 hours and you couldn't move around? Or worse, 6 hours? Of course, you will be stressed out. We have talked in previous lectures about how stress causes disease. There is a mind-body connection. The best defense against not only cancer but any disease is a well-functioning immune system. So what happens when we're stressed out? We see elevated cortisol levels, elevated stress hormones. It impairs the immune system's response. We also see problems with DNA repairs. increase inflammation. And this increased inflammation leads to free radical damage. I want to leave you with a challenge, and that is to review your risk factors. Identify changes that you can take now to reduce your exposure to factors that can lead to stress and cause disease. Over my nursing career, I have come in contact with thousands of patients, and in anecdotal observation, I have seen the progression, the relationship between the progression of cancer and stress. A patient that comes to mind is Nancy. She also had ovarian cancer. She lived a very chaotic, stressful life. She was going through a nasty divorce and strapped with debt, the divorce, and the job. She rapidly deteriorated. I believe, and so did she, that her stressful life and her faulty diet contributed to the progression of her cancer. Now, we only have a few more minutes, and there's so much more that I would like to cover. And I will just give you a brief synopsis, and you can find more information in my book, The Mind-Body-God Connection. Dr. Colin Campbell is a professor at Cornell University, and he talks about the different stages of disease. He talks about the initiation, the promotion, and the progression. And he talks about diet, which is a vital link. He talks about the emotional stress. And in this book, I talk about diet and how certain foods fuel cancer cells, in particularly sugar and high protein diets. I also cover information about how to get on the right track, laughter therapy, changing your diet. All of that information and much more is in the book, Mind, Body, God Connection. I thank you, and I will see you next time.
Is there a connection between what we think and how we feel? Does the mind talk to the body and the body to the mind? Does this communication affect our spiritual walk? In her new book, Mind, Body, God Connection, Darlene D. Hall explores the links between the mind and the body and its development of disease. Mind, Body, God Connection is available at Barnes & Noble, on Amazon.com, and Christian bookstores nationwide. Mind, Body, God Connection by Darlene D. Hall.